The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
As a former New Hampshire state representative who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King in 1963, he currently serves on the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights. He's a product of Birmingham, Alabama, where at one time he had to guess how many jelly beans were in a fruit jar just to be able to vote.
We've come a long way, but we're not there yet.
Together we will explore the visible laws, invisible laws, and the structures above and beneath our human surface that keep us reaching for the stars. It is his goal to work with you in putting Nashua back on top, to be voted the #1 city in the nation again.
We are in a crisis situation, and that's what we're going to talk about.
I'm Harvey Keye. Welcome to Nashua Strong.
Hello, Nashua, New Hampshire. Happy springtime. Welcome to the finest organization in Nashua that will take your picture and send it around the world. We have to thank Dave and Dan. We don't call them Dunkin' Donut, we call them Dave and Dan because they're the best in the world in doing this. I want to thank them first before we get involved in this beautiful show. I call it beautiful because we do it from our hearts. We don't do it to impress anybody. We don't do it to earn money. We do it because we love Nashua. And we do it because we think the foundation of Nashua is basically what people do here to make it stronger every day. I happen to have as my guest today, I had him on my guest, I had him on my show a long time ago, and he was so impressive. And I didn't tell him then, but I wrote something at that time, and here's what I have for him. This is what I thought of this guy called Michael, who's the executive director of the soup kitchen and shelter, and who is now a priest. And that combination is what Martin Luther King says, to give and serve with extreme humility is godly.
Amen.
So, let me tell you what I thought about this guy called Michael Reinke.
Yeah.
Since the first time I met this young man, he had epitomized a rare integrity as well as intellect. He has stood his ground. That was almost 5 years ago.
That's probably true, yeah.
He never jumped on a bandwagon and he never beat in the drums. Has not created any personal cults. He has done a marvelous job as a scholar and a teacher so far in the city of Nashua. And I think he's found that sufficient. And in my mind, when I first met this young fella, I said, if you wanted to learn how to think and avoid vague words, fuzzy thoughts that send clouds over reality, Michael is our man.
Wow. I'm honored. Wow.
I want to say to you, Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
It's a blessing to have you on our show. And it's a greater blessing to have you speak to the about the soup kitchen and what it's done, and what you have done with it since you got here.
Yeah.
I never knew you had all those plans.
Right.
And you probably didn't either. They just sort of rolled out. But I wanted to ask you, where did you go to school?
Well,
Elementary school.
Elementary school. There's a there's a town just 30 miles south of Keene. So think out Keene, New Hampshire. Picture going to Keene to maybe go to drop off a kid to go to school there or go to a performance there. You know, Keene's a lovely city, but there's not a lot around Keene. And I grew up 30 miles south of Keene. Not actually in New Hampshire. It was a mile from New Hampshire. Like we almost rose to being able to be from New Hampshire, but we didn't quite make it.
You were in Vermont.
No, I was in Massachusetts.
Oh, Master, what's the name of the town?
The town is called Royalston. Royalston. I understand it's one of the largest towns geographically in Massachusetts, and it is certainly among the smallest towns in terms of population. There were 1,000 people in Royalston when I was growing up, and my graduating 6th grade class had 14 kids, and my brother's class had 10 kids, and he was the only boy.
Ah,
Which you might think, today we might say, wow, that gives you a lot of options. But when you're in 6th grade, you're not looking for dating and whatever.
Yeah.
He was like, where are the other boys I can play with? So yeah, that was kind of thing.
now that's elementary school. Where'd you go to high school?
So then I went to high school. There was a regional high school. I went to Athol High School, town next door. Some kids went to the technical school. That was also kind of a regional school, but we either went to one or the other.
What about college?
And then at college, I went to this place, it's in Central Connecticut, called Wesleyan University. I don't want you to confuse it with Wellesley College. That's a different place. It's in Massachusetts. And Wellesley, where Hillary Clinton went, I believe today it's still an all-women's college. Wesleyan is, it's integrated in terms of gender, and it was one of the first schools to integrate in terms of race. Martin Luther King Jr. Came up and spoke several times at Wesleyan University.
Were
And
you there? Did you hear?
not when he was never there when I was there. I wish I should not put my hand on the mic, I'm sure. But Ted Kennedy, I don't know if you.
Yeah.
He was scheduled to give the graduation speech, and unfortunately he died. That was in 2016.
Yeah.
And 2008. And some guy, I understand he's pretty good at speaking. I don't know. His name is Barack Obama.
I've heard of him.
You've heard of it?
Yeah.
So he came. This was before he became president. He came in and he tried to live up to Ted Kennedy's
Yeah.
standard in terms of giving a speech.
Now, all of this is down your craw.
Yeah.
What or who inspired you to become a giver and a server? Because that's really what you have done for a long time.
Yeah. Most specifically, it was my parents. My mom was a graduate student at Boston University. My dad was a graduate student at some place, I don't know, called Harvard. And they had gotten together, they'd gotten married, and they saw all these people out there. This is kind of the 60s. There's protests around Vietnam. There's protests around the racial segregation that we had then, and to a degree continue to have in the United States. And they're like, we want to try to help those that we can touch with our own two hands. And
Say that again.
we want to help those that we can touch with our own two hands. They didn't,
Ground level.
yeah, right
Hand-to-hand
there.
combat.
Right. So, after they had me, and I understand it took a couple of years to make that happen. I wasn't involved then, but it took a couple of years. And I'm not as familiar. So you think about Loving v. Virginia, the Supreme Court case
Yeah.
that said people of different races, ethnicities can marry each other, and no state can say, I'm going to stand between love, which is awesome. Loving v. Virginia was 1967, 69.
About that time, yeah.
Right about that. After they had me, I was born in 69. my mom read that there were kids who were born of parents, one might be white, the other might be black.
From the same mother.
And they were having a hard time being adopted because white families would say, well, I don't want to adopt that kid because that kid's interracial. And then a black family might say, well, I want to adopt a kid who's black. African American, we would say today.
Now, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You just mentioned two words,
Sure.
white and black.
Right.
In photography,
Right.
on the either end of that spectrum is black and white.
Right.
Never ever to come together.
Right.
Would you call that a social construct?
You look at our and I'm not an expert in this, but you look at our genome, like all those genes that make us who we are. And my understanding is that we are all of human beings, every single human being, we are like 98% similar, right? And then you look at, just sort of like how do we make those distinctions? This may be, hopefully it's not, but this may be a shock to your viewers. But you know what? If we were to look at Jesus today, Jesus would look a lot more like you than he would look like me. I'm just saying.
Well, he would look like me because I'm a human being.
He would look like both of us that way.
Because
But in
we're
terms of
human
his
beings,
skin
right?
color, he would be a lot darker than I
Now
am.
I ask you this
Yeah.
question. Do you think we should get rid of calling people black and white?
I really believe that we should call people what they want to be called. I'm not.
Not what they want to be called, but what they are. They're called human beings.
They're called human
That's
beings.
what they mean. And in this country, black and white put some people in a silo and other people in a silo.
That's a fair point.
And whatever they do, they
Right.
could never make these silos empty into one.
Right.
So now I'm going to skip a little bit and
Sure.
say now, not Father Michael. I'm going to call you because you remind me of an altar boy when I
Okay.
was in a Catholic high school.
Sure.
And I won't call you Father because that's overriding the Episcopal
Sure.
Church.
Right.
They call you, what do they call you, Reverend? What do they-
Reverend. Some people are called father. Some
Oh,
people,
do you?
Yeah,
Okay.
some people do. Yeah.
Because the Episcopal Church is where my daughter went at St. Paul's.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and we loved that school, and she was there for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. At any rate, I'll still call you Michael because I love you, and I want
Well, thank you.
never insult you
Yeah.
by calling you something you don't want to be. But I think if we got rid of black and white in this in this city, if we stop calling people, it's already institutionalized, and it's hard to get rid of.
Right.
But it is the cause, in my opinion, of supremacy and racism by calling each other, because there's a code word in the country called white that says superior.
Right.
You don't have to do nothing. You just be born white and you're superior. If you're born not white, you're inferior.
Well, I'm gonna give you two different answers. So on the one hand, I have two daughters, and I have to tell you that I intentionally named both my daughters. One is named Canaan. There's a land of Canaan, land of freedom.
Yeah.
The other is named Annika. That's Aniko with an accent on the O. And I and their mom intentionally named our daughters names where if you just looked at it, you wouldn't know if Canaan or Annika is a boy or a girl. You'd be like, well, that's an interesting name. I haven't seen that. But like if you name a child Sally, you know that that's probably a girl. If you name a child Fred or Frederick, it's probably a boy. So we add names where he said, we want you to get to know this child as a human being before making an assumption of like, is this a boy or girl? So that's one answer. On the other hand, Harvey, my memory is that you're from Alabama, is that right?
Yes.
I've never lived in Alabama. I've only visited Alabama, I think, once. But I think that it's fair to say that there was a lot of racial segregation, in fact, slavery in Alabama. And if somebody said, I want you to recognize my race because it's an important part of who I am, because either me or more likely today, my family had to carry that burden of what it meant to be dealing with, quite honestly, a racist population, a racist government. Who was it that stood in the doorway and said,
George Wallace.
Segregation now, segregation forever? If I were a child of color, if I were African American growing up in Alabama at that time, I might be like, my governor doesn't believe that I should have equal access to education, health care, transportation, jobs, employment, happiness, all those things. And if that person said to me, call me African American, call me black, call me, I'd be like, I'll call you whatever you want to be called. Because to me, it's recognizing what somebody's gone through.
I hear you loud and clear. Yeah. And let me say this to you like this. If I live in the past, I'm depressed.
Sure.
If I live in the future, I have anxiety. So the past is gone. George Wallace is no longer.
It's true.
Colored folks in Birmingham, Alabama don't exist anymore as colored folks. They exist as African Americans and blacks and colored folks.
Right.
But that's the way I was raised. But I can't go back and invest in any of the current time.
Right.
In times that I cannot change.
Right.
I can only use those times that I grew up to make myself a better human being.
Right.
And that's what I do. So I live the here and now. Not frustrated, not confused.
Right.
Ugliness, yes, but never, ever depressed because of what I came through. I look at that, Michael, as my foundation. And that's to who I am today. And I look at your foundation.
Right.
And that's who you are today. And that's why at the time I met you 5 years ago, that you had this huge ability to listen. And you still listen, I think. Yeah. And having said that, I have to ask you a couple of things. We have a few more minutes. You've been the director of the soup kitchen for how long?
Oh, it will be, it's 5.5 years. It'll be 6 years in November.
Where was it located when you came here and took over?
We had just finished a major campaign. Many people, actually even still today, remember the soup kitchen as being on Chestnut Street. Yeah. And our current location now on 2 Quinn Street is being the VFW, right?
That's a big transition.
And they got everybody together. They had a vision. They raised a lot of money. They raised, I think, $2.7 million. A lot of money. And they renovated the old VFW hall and turned it into a community kitchen and a pantry. One of the cool things about our pantry is that it's client choice. So some pantries will say, okay, here's a bag of food, which is awesome because if you're hungry, you want some food. But there are, not everybody is the same. I think that's kind of what we're talking about before. Not everybody's the same. And I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but Lowell, just 13 miles south of us, Lowell is has the second largest Cambodian population outside Cambodia in the United States. Second largest population. The other one is Chicago, I think. But Lowell, second largest Cambodian population. And if you gave a bag of food, and let's just say you gave a bag of food and it had things that you and I might have grown up with, macaroni and cheese, pasta, angel hair pasta. Maybe it's not good for you, but maybe it had like Spam in a can. You take that thing and wind it around and pop it out and whatever. You and I might have grown up eating that.
Yeah, pretty good.
Right? Again, not so good for you healthy, but, in terms of taste,
Yeah, it's pretty good.
it's good. But if you're from Cambodia, you never grew up with any of those things. You didn't grow up with angel hair pasta or macaroni and cheese or this weird pinkish meat called Spam. You grew up with all the other things, maybe ramen noodles or something. So what ends up happening is that if you don't offer people, if you don't let them choose and you just give them a bag, then they go in that bag and they say, okay, well, I don't eat that. And they just throw it away, right? So one of the things that's nice about that place that the community invested and made possible on 2 Quincy Street is that we have client choice. So if you are looking for food, we say, we have food.
This is what is available.
This is what available.
Choose what
and
you
then
like.
you choose what you like. Right.
That's a smorgasbord.
I like to determine it as a buffet.
A buffet.
Buffet,
I
yeah.
accept that.
Right, it's a buffet.
Well, that's so different. And so
Yeah.
what is the number of people that you feed a day?
Oh, we'll have anywhere from usually 50 to 75 folks for breakfast in the morning. We'll have between 50 and 100 people come into our pantry during the midday. And we'll have somewhere between 75 to occasionally as many as 200 for dinner at night.
And what's the qualification to come in and be fed? How
So
if I walked into the soup kitchen today for dinner, could I eat?
It's a very strict test. We train our volunteers. There's a lot of training involved in this. And we say, okay, here's the important thing. This is what you really need to know. You have to ask this. Are you hungry? And if they say they're hungry, you need to feed them. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nashua, you know where to go eat tonight and down.
We
the
accept
road.
donations.
Bring some
Everybody in
donations.
Nashua. We have some really good food, but
And all you have to do is say, I'm hungry.
and we will feed you. Because
Wow.
that's I think that's
Now
fundamental.
that's
yeah.
the strength of Nashua.
Yeah.
That's what Mayor Donches loves.
Yeah.
And I think the people at this state, the people in Nashua who love Nashua, downtown Nashua love the soup kitchen
Yeah.
because it helps people who, for whatever the reason it is, are not able to feed themselves or choose not to feed themselves.
Right.
Is not your business. Your business is to feed those people who are hungry.
Right.
Is that it?
And I really feel that, so part of the reason, so I think that, at least one of the reasons why we're talking today is I recently got ordained. And it's really important for me to separate those two because, to me, what's important is, are you hungry? And if you're hungry, we will feed you. It doesn't matter what race you are, what color you are, what religion you are. Doesn't matter whether you're from the east side of Nashua or the west side of Nashua or the north side. If you're from Merrimack and you need to have some food, we'll feed you.
The entrance ticket is I'm hungry.
You're hungry, right?
Okay.
But so if you take that, that's what I do. That's what I do. Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of thing. But then on Sunday, I think about one of the things I've heard recently. There's in the Episcopal Church, our presiding bishop. So it's not like the Pope. It's sort of more like the first bishop among all equals of all other bishops. His name is Michael Curry. And if you've ever had a chance,
Michael what?
Michael Curry. There's a couple that got married a couple years ago. His name is Harry, and I think her name might be Megan. And they've since moved to Los Angeles. I'm not sure what's going on, but he preached at their wedding, and you can find it if you go online. Bishop Curry preaching at Harry and Meghan's
Yeah.
wedding. He might have been a prince at the time, I'm not sure. But he's talking about love. He's talking about what it means part of the Jesus people. And that's a lot of people have a lot of different definitions about that. But I say that it all comes back down to that fundamental part of love, of what does it mean to truly love our fellow human being, like you were talking about in the beginning. And I would say that, when you were a little boy, when I was a little boy, and maybe you fell down, maybe I fell down and skinned our knee, maybe we were hungry. Our parents never said, well, did you really deserve to get, your knee all patched up? Did you really deserve to have a meal? Because, no, they were like, I love you. I'm going to make sure you're okay. That's what it's all about. It's love.
Could you probably tell our audience how love, awareness, consciousness, and God are wrapped up in one?
Oh, that is so much. We only have like a few more minutes left. You're asking me to explain what is the basis of religions all.
But Michael,
Yeah.
you have all this basic intellect. That's what I felt when I first met you. You haven't lost it. You could give me that answer in a sentence, because you now
Right.
are acting like an altar boy.
Right. Well, there is a
But let me say this before you say that. The things that I just mentioned,
right.
time, love, God, whoever your perception or conception is,
Right.
has no ending.
Right.
Consciousness has no ending. Awareness is consciousness. All of that is wrapped up in love.
Right.
And it has no finish line
Right.
in my mind. So I have stripped my mind of all of the outrageous, in my opinion, definitions that ends love. I don't love you anymore.
Right.
I can't love you because of these kind of reasons.
Right. Right.
I've stripped my mind of that.
Good.
So I'm clearly going forward, and there's no finish line to my love of all human beings. And I think that's where you became, maybe you were an Episcopal priest before you knew you were, but I certainly appreciate your embracing
Right.
that part of our society that is not blind,
Right.
but you treat all as equally as possible, because that's probably impossible. But the best you can as a human being, treat all others as a human being. Let me ask you this before you already gave me the answer.
Well, I have one more answer for you,
Okay.
which is, so there was a rabbi. It wasn't Jesus, but he was alive around the same time as Jesus. Hillel is his name, Rabbi Hillel. And I'm going to hopefully do my best to represent this well, because it's not my tradition, but I think it speaks to the truth of the tradition I was brought up in, and I think the tradition of most, if not all, religions, in the world today. So there was a man came up to him, Rabbi, said, "I will convert. I will become Jewish if you can explain the whole Torah to me." And for those of your listeners who haven't read the Torah, it's a long. It's not like a short little sentence or two. And he said, "I will convert if you can explain the whole Torah to me while standing on one foot." So that's a challenge too, because I don't know about you, but you have to balance on one foot while you're explaining the whole Torah. And he said, I guess he stood on one foot. He said, "Don't do anything to others that you would not have done to you." That's the whole meaning of the Torah. The rest is explanation. Go and read. And, I think that that's kind of the summary. Is like, you know what? My memory is that Jesus said something kind of similar, like, do unto others as you would have done to yourself. And maybe that's what it means to have religion and love. And what would I want to, if I came into your house and said, Harvey, I'm hungry. I know. I don't even have to assume. I know that you would say, well, here you go. Here's some food.
It's yours.
Right.
And I know that about you.
Yeah. If I came in and I was cold, you'd say, here's a coat. I'm not going to ask why you don't have a coat.
Here's a coat.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Right.
Folks, you got I want to call him Father. I want to call him a bishop. I don't call him anything. I don't call him Michael.
You can call me Michael.
Michael
Yeah.
has come into our presence with some ideas and some thoughts, some actions that erases the ugliness between us. And we need to get rid of the ugliness between us, because we cannot erase history. We cannot erase the past. And if we struggle with it, we become depressed. And that causes you to go to the doctor to get some medication. By the same token, if you become so excited about the future, you become anxious, and you got to have it now, and you got to have your way now, is the same kind of thing. You have to go to the doctor. So let me suggest to you, strongly, live today for here and now as human beings. I go to the post office quite frequently.
Yeah.
And I see a building right across from the
Oh
post
my
office.
gosh, you should.
And
Yeah.
and I see it's going to become a school or something.
No, it started as a school. Started as a school back in 1892, right? So I think that's 100. If I, math may have not been my strong suit, but my understanding is if you take 2022 and subtract 1892, you get something close to 130 years. And it really hadn't been used as a school since, my understanding, since 1971. Now I was 2 at 1971, so I wasn't there to say yes, it was 90. So somebody might say, well, I went to, Sunday school there. Oh, I believe you. But it hadn't been used as a school since 1971. And it was right across from the post office. And one day I was walking by there, and we do a backpack school supply giveaway every summer for kids who are going back to school and they need school supplies. We do a backpack school supply giveaway, and we had a couple of backpacks left over. And whenever you want to do a tour of 2 Quincy Street, where we have our community kitchen and our food pantry and a lot of other things, you'll notice that we don't have a lot of extra space. If we were here, if we were at 2 Quincy Street, we would have boxes here and things hanging from the ceiling and whatever. We didn't have a lot of space. So I'm walking by there. I'm like, maybe we could put stuff in that. Seems like an empty building. So I talked to Father Kerper. He's the rector of St. Patrick's. And I said, Father Kerper, could we put our extra backpacks there? And he said, sure. And so we were just talking. And as we were talking, it was like, what are your long-term plans for that empty building? He's like, I'd love to turn it into a homeless shelter. And I was like, I can help you out, because I have a homeless shelter where the buildings are falling down. Our buildings, they keep people safe, they keep people warm, they keep people dry. But they're in the studio here, we might have 8, 10, perhaps even 15 people sleeping in bunks. And this is not a big studio. We might have a lot of people. And so out of that conversation, that was 2017. I talked with Father Kerper, we talked to my board, we talked to the Diocese of Manchester, we talked to the congregation at St. Patrick's. And from all those different things, we assigned a lease in 2018 to have that building and make that building a new homeless shelter. And we signed a lease in 2018 for 40 years for $1 a year, which you might think, oh, that's a really good deal, $1 a year. That's not very much for a building. But the condition was we had to renovate it. And this is a building that, it had asbestos in it. It had lead paint in it. I don't know if you know anybody who has like some mobility issues, has a hard time getting up and down stairs. There was no elevator in it. Very little, if any, insulation in the attic. And we developed a plan. That was 2018. And we said, okay, we need to raise some money to renovate this building. First, we thought we needed to raise $4 million, which to me sounds like a lot of money. Like, okay, let's raise $4 million. Well, then, it turns out that some of the engineering issues, the plumbing, the heating, the whatever, that was going to cost more. Then it turned out that the roof has a slate roof. Slate roofs are supposed to last 100 years. If you remember back just a little bit ago when I did some math, this building is 130 years.
Yeah.
So that meant that roof, that's not doing so well either. And then there's this thing that, people might have been noticing at the gas pump. It's called inflation. That added something. Gosh, when we got done with it, that $4 million project is now a $6.5 million project. And then you have architecture and permitting and legal fees and this and insurance. And so we have a campaign of $8.5 million for that building. And the nice thing is, as I talk to you today, we've raised $7.8 million. We have a matching opportunity. We have an anonymous donor who's going to hopefully give us $315,000. So 7.8 plus 3, that gets you up to 8.2. If we're able to make that matching opportunity, I think we have like $200,000 left. So if anybody wants to make a gift right now to make sure that everybody, single adult men, single adult women, families with kids. Think about kids. Take the smallest bedroom in your house, and that's where a family with 1, 2, 3 kids might be all staying. And we're going to be having a place where a family's going to have their own room or 2 rooms, and there's going to be a place for childcare for the kids, partnering with a police athletic league, the PALS program, to make sure that kids who are older have a place right next door they can go, partnering with St. Patrick's and Good Shepherd to do homework help for the families. We're going to have a lot of different resources right there.
Couple of things.
Yeah.
Why did you determine to become a priest?
Because, in my job in nonprofit, it's about how do we run programs well. As a priest, you're talking about loving and being a shepherd for a community. And those two things are complementary, but they're not the same kind of thing. So as a nonprofit director, I can help make sure we're providing good food, good shelter, all those other things. As a priest, I can be working on a whole other different level in terms of creating that beloved community. I think that was even like, again, we remember Martin Luther King Jr. I think there was one of his books. One might have been like the beloved community, and that, to me, that's important.
What is it that I can do to help?
Well,
What is it that we can do
Yeah.
to help? And let me just preface that with this. maybe you have forgotten. I am your ambassador
I know.
for
Yeah.
Kids on Meals.
Part of the reason why we're here.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And with this struggle
Right.
to raise money, because you have to have money
Right.
to do what you're doing, I need you to help me get a letter written to the community from the ambassador to raise money, and we will start that as soon as the sun comes up tomorrow.
So I think that's a really, you know what, they say that Paul, even if he just convinced 3 people a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, you add that all up exponentially, that, you know, Christianity would be as large as it is today. We need you as ambassadors. We need everybody to be ambassadors, because there's so many people that are not aware, don't know, and if we can make them aware, you know, we can do so much good in the world.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate your coming, Michael, and what you've done for our city.
Oh, well, thank
and
you.
what you've
Thanks.
done
It's
for
been,
other human beings.
right.
And it ain't the white, it ain't the black, it ain't the whatever.
Right.
It's all human beings. And I can't thank you for becoming the priest, the altar boy. And thank you so much, Michael. Do come back again. I'll be your ambassador. And I get a letter from you sometime soon.
Okay.
Next week or so. No hurry.
Yep.
But I have some people, a list of people that I want to contact from Harvey,
Great.
who is ambassador for kids.
I am honored. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir,
You're welcome.
and do well.
Thank you. All right.
Expect, folks, remember this guy. He has brought us from almost 0, almost up to 100. We still got some places to go. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. And thank Dan and Dick for their expertise in this business. See you next time. Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.